Good evening, and welcome back to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight I have Dean Gleason with the Sea Valley Bigfoot Research Team out of New York. Dean has had several experiences and several years of research under his belt. He is also so pleasant to speak to. Dean started his research probably, how long ago has that been, Dean?
Oh, it's got to be at least 30 years.
30 years. So you're what we call an old timer.
And the beard's starting to show it.
I have one too when I don't wax. So, so did you start your research after your encounter? Because I know you've had four, or was it something you were interested
It's
in?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to get the Scholastic books from the book fair. There was always two or three Bigfoot ones, and I always used to buy those and read them about Bigfoot encounters. Never thought I'd have one myself. Being in New York, I didn't know that Bigfoot even were in the area. But when I was a kid, my grandfather, who was a great outdoorsman, I learned everything I know about hunting and fishing and trapping from him. He was just unbelievable guy. And him and I used to trap muskrats for the fur back before PETA decided that wasn't good anymore, for a little extra money. You got like $4 a hide for them back then, which was good money back in the late 70s. So anyway, I remember trapping with him, and the last year that him and I did it together, there was this one area, the swamp, where I saw it looked like a good place to put traps, and he said, "No, no, don't go down there. Stay out of that area." But he didn't tell me why, which was unusual for my grandfather, because he was one of those kind of guys. If you asked him what time it was, he'd tell you how to build a watch. That's just how he was. So after he stopped doing it and he turned it over to me, and I was doing it on my own, I didn't see any reason not to put traps down in there, so I did. So to this day, I'm wondering if my grandfather saw something down there when I wasn't with him, because he acted real funny I remember he acted real funny that day. So anyway, I went down there to check the traps, and I saw that I had something in one of them, and it was still alive, which was unusual because we use the humane instant kill traps, but whatever was there was still alive in the trap. So I went down to see what it was, and I caught a great big, huge snapping turtle. And I don't know if you know much about snapping turtles or not, but next to an alligator, they're probably one of the most vicious things you'll find in a swamp. They'll rip you up in a hurry.
And they climb fence.
Oh man, they're terrible.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out what to do to get him out of this trap without losing a finger or something. So finally I figured, well, I'll distract him with a boat oar, and then because it was one of his back feet that was caught in the trap, and then I'll get the trap off him, and maybe I can get it off real quick, and I can get my arms back out of the way. And it worked. I got him out, and he kind of gave me the little turtle finger and went back up into the swamp. So I started resetting the trap, and I looked over and I noticed something unusual coming from the shore over to where the trap was in the mud. So once the mud settled a little bit out of the water and I could see through the water a little bit, I noticed that there was a set of tracks, big, huge, human-looking tracks coming from this shore over to where my trap was. And then they went around the trap and went into the creek. So I said, boy, they look like what I've seen Bigfoot tracks look like. But I was like, it can't be Bigfoot here. We're in New York, and I'd always heard they were in the, out west. And I figured, it's got to be just somebody running around with their bare feet. Well, I got looking at it a little closer, and they were just way too big to have been a person. So I decided not to reset that trap, and I took it out, and I took my boat over to the other side of the creek, and I found where it had come up on the other side. And I didn't tell anybody about that for years. I'm thinking what happened was the Bigfoot saw something, splashing around there in the swamp and thought, well, maybe a fish or something has come up in here. Easy meal. Then got over there and realized it was a snapping turtle and came to the same conclusion I did. It didn't want to mess with the snapping turtle. So it just took off and went across the creek. So for years and years and years, I never told anybody that story. I never told anybody about it. And oh, probably close to 30 years ago. My brother had taken over the family farm, and he raises beef cattle there. And there's two sides of a road that runs down through the middle of the farm. And one side has a lot of woods on it, and the other side is mostly fields. So every fall, he takes the cows out of the mostly wooded side and puts them on the other side of the road, just because he doesn't want a hunter accidentally shooting one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of deer hunters up there that aren't really ethical, so they'll wander over onto property that's not theirs, and so you kind of have to be careful around that time of year. So I stopped at his house and I asked him if the cows had been moved over, and he said, "Yeah, it's okay to go back there and go hunting." And he said, "Maybe you'll get a treat today." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, 2 days ago, there was a big cow moose out in the field. And we're north of the Adirondack Mountains, and there's quite a few moose in the Adirondacks, but where we are, it's very, very rare to ever see one. And I've never seen one. So I thought, oh, that'd be cool if I ran into a moose." So I went back and I found my normal spot that I set, and I spent most of the day there, and I didn't see anything, no deer or anything. So it was getting about time to think about getting out of there for the day. And my stepfather has an old beat up pickup truck with no muffler on it that he uses to feed the cows with. And when he starts it up, you can hear it for 20 miles. It's just, really loud. So he started the truck up, and all the cows that were over on the other side of the road, they got all excited because they knew they were about to get fed. So they're mooing and bellowing and carrying on. So I'm like, well, they're making a lot of noise, so it's not much sense staying. I might as well get out of here. And I was just about to stand up when right over directly in front of where I was, the brush started moving. I mean, really moving. And deer don't make the brush move very little. And I'm thinking to myself, the moose must be right across there. I'm going to get a chance to see the moose. So I'm staring in that spot, and all of a sudden, a head comes up out of the brush, and it wasn't no moose. It was a big male squatch. He stuck his head up and he looked around, and then he made a noise like a big barrel-chested man that's discouraged. He went, "Oh," like that. And then he walked away. So looking back on it, I'm thinking he was doing the same exact thing I was doing. He was sitting down in that brush, hoping a deer would come through that clearing. And he heard all that noise from the cows and said, "Ah, the deer aren't coming through here tonight." So he got up and was like, he was frustrated and he walked away. That's my interpretation of what happened. So I'm
I
standing there looking at, go ahead.
I get the impression it's so human type. Just okay. I mean, I totally can relate to that Sasquatch at that moment. I get you, buddy. But okay.
Yeah, he'd been sitting there probably all day like I was, and oh well, I'm not going to get a deer tonight. Is probably what he was thinking.
I get it.
Um, I'll come back to that same spot in a little bit because something else happened right in that same spot a couple of years later. But anyway, over the years after I saw the Bigfoot there, I started paying a little bit more closer attention, and I started doing a little bit more reading on the subject. And I started finding Bigfoot sign in that area. I'd find trees bent over. I found tracks a couple more times. I would hear wood knocking, which I didn't, up to that point, I'd never heard about wood knocking. But I'd always just figured it was just, an over enthusiastic woodpecker. And, but then I could tell the difference. I'd hear a woodpecker and I could hear what that sounded like. And then I'd hear the wood knocking and it was a total different sound. And, so then like I said, started paying closer attention to what was going on. So it was probably about maybe 5 years later. I was on my property. I own 28 acres, but it's about, as a crow flies, probably 4 or 5 miles away from my brother's place. And I was setting up on a tree stand watching the field. And these three doe had been coming out almost every evening into the field. And I started calling them the Three Stooges because all three of them came out together and they played around in the field for a little while. Then they graze and then they go back up into the woods. So they had just come out. And so I was kind of half paying attention to them and I was half looking around other places when I heard one of them make a noise. So I turned around and Deer, when they're on their alert, they make a huffing kind of a sound, which means that they think that something's wrong or there's danger in the area, so they're alerting the other deer. And the one deer was making a huffing sound, and she was pawing the ground. But that doesn't always mean, you know, that a predator or something there. Sometimes it just means that maybe a buck is coming through because it was pre-mating season, and the doe really don't like the bucks until they're actually in what they call the rut. They kind of, you know, really don't hang out with them. So I'm thinking, well, maybe there's a buck coming through, and she's just alerting that she doesn't really want anything to do with him. And so I started looking in the same direction she was looking in, and I wasn't seeing nothing, but she was bound and determined there was something in that direction that she was not happy was there. Um, so all of a sudden, she decided, the heck with this, I'm getting out of here. So the three of them turned around and they just took off running. So I'm watching them run away, and from the spot where she was looking, I heard a great big aggressive Bigfoot howl. I mean, it was no doubt in my mind what it was when I heard it. It was the strangest, creepiest thing I ever heard in my life. I mean, it just kind of sucked the energy out of the air. It was so loud and so aggressive. And as soon as that Bigfoot howled, every coyote for probably about 20 miles started howling. And then it did it again. And I don't know if you've ever seen the episode of Happy Days where Fonzie goes camping, and he's laying down in his sleeping bag and he's trying to sleep, and all the animals are making noise and he can't sleep. So he sets up in his bag and he goes, "Cool it." And all the animals get quiet. Well, the second time this Bigfoot did that, everything, it was like somebody turned the volume off to the world. There wasn't a sound, not a bug, nothing. It was just dead quiet. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck am I going to do? I'm a mile and a half from my truck across an open field. I've got a deer rifle with me, but I don't know if I got enough stopping power to stop a squatch on the, you know, that's pissed off. So I sat there for a minute or two trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I decided, well, discretion is a better part of valor. I'm just going to ease on out of here just as quickly and as quietly as I possibly can. And so I got down on the tree stand and I walked almost all the way back to my truck backwards, looking over my shoulder, expecting any second he was going to come charging out of that brush. But he didn't. I didn't see him that night, but I definitely knew. I knew within 25, 30 feet right where he was.
Wow.
But even though I couldn't see him, but I could tell right where he was. And I didn't have anything else happen that year, but the following year, I was back there hunting, same tree stand, and it was the last day of the season. And a buck came out just about dusk, and I shot it. And I know for a fact it was dead. I was overlooking at it. I had it by the horns. And so I left the deer where it was, and I walked back to my truck. And I took my time since it was the last day of the season. I put my rifle away. I took off my hunting jacket. I always carry some old clothes with me in case I do get a deer, so I don't get blood all over my good hunting clothes. So I drove my truck back. The deer was gone. It was just gone. It wasn't in the spot I left it. So I'm not one of these guys that thinks Bigfoot automatically. I'm thinking, well, coyotes must have came through here and they dragged it away. So grabbed my flashlight, started looking around. No drag marks, no blood marks, nothing. It was just like the deer just disappeared. So I started walking back towards the woods, and I saw something sticking up out of there's a drainage ditch between the woods and the hayfield. And there was something down in the drainage ditch. So I went down there and looked, and there my deer was, stuffed down in the drainage ditch. So I pulled the deer up out of the drainage ditch, and I started field dressing it. And all the while I was field dressing this deer, I kept hearing like a coming from the woods. So as soon as I got the deer dressed, I grabbed my flashlight and I jumped up on the back of my truck and I shined the light in the direction where I could hear the noise, and I saw an outline. I didn't get a good look at it, but I saw an outline of an upright, standing human form. And as soon as the light came near it, it turned and just strode away. Like 2 or 3 big steps and it was gone. So it was ticked off. I took the deer.
Fonzie took your deer. A Bigfoot named Fonzie took your deer. So, but you, I'm sorry, but you had to feel watched out there. You felt it. It to me, I would be like, if you want it that bad, you can have it. And I would have very gracefully, well, really not so gracefully, got in my truck and left. But that's just me. That's just me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was almost exactly. No, it wasn't exactly. It was a little less than a year. I was going to say almost exactly a year later, but it was a little less than a year later. It was. We have two different seasons up here. We have a rifle season and we have muzzle loading season. Muzzle loading season happens first. You get an extra week of hunting if you'll hunt with a muzzle loader. So I was in the woods and I shot at a buck with my muzzle loader and I didn't know if I hit it or not. So the deer had taken off running into the woods, and I was pretty sure I missed it, but I wanted to make sure because I didn't want it to suffer if I had hit it. So I went looking for the deer. Didn't find any blood, didn't find any sign of the deer, but I still probably took a half an hour, 45 minutes just checking and looking around and trying to follow the deer in the direction where I thought it went, and I didn't see any sign of it. So I came to the conclusion I must have missed it. So I made a big loop and came back around because deer are not the most intelligent creatures in the world. And a lot of times, if they get scared in one spot, they'll run away from that spot, but then they'll come back to it in a little bit. So I'm thinking if I make a big loop and come back around, maybe the deer will be back where it was and I'll get another shot at it. So I had reloaded my muzzle loader and I was walking across this big flat rock that had a lot of moss and stuff on it. So I was making very, very little noise. And I was doing it on purpose too. I was walking very carefully, so I didn't want to spook the deer if it was back out in the field. So I just stepped back out in the hardwoods, and I hadn't taken very many steps, just a few. And I caught something out of the corner of my eye. And at first, my brain was saying, "Oh, it's a stump, it's a rock." So I kept walking, and all of a sudden, the rest of my brain looked it up and said, "No, there's no stump or rock over there." So I turned around and looked, and I saw what I thought was a hunter in a ghillie suit sitting on the ground with his hands in front of him, looking over his shoulder, kind of not looking over his shoulder, but looking sideways at me. And I'm thinking, okay, somebody has snuck in here and is hunting and hopes that I'll just pass him by. So I figured, well, I'll walk a little bit closer to him and then I'll say something to him. So I kind of walked at an angle and I probably got about 50, 60 feet away from him. And I stopped and turned around and I said, "Hey, buddy, what's up?" Well, then it stood up and it wasn't a person. It was a juvenile Bigfoot. It was probably about 4 foot tall. And it just stood up and it looked at me for a couple of seconds. And then it just turned around and casually walked away. It didn't act like it was afraid of me. It was just like I said hi to a person on the street and they just kept walking. And I'm standing there realizing I just said, "Hey, what's up?" to a Bigfoot. And my heart was right up in my throat. And I was like, holy cow, nobody's ever going to believe this. So I started gifting them that next summer. I started leaving cookies and things out for them. I had a real good source where I could get like, I don't know what they call them where you live, but they call them like Hydroxes up here. They're like a cheap version of Oreo. But I had a guy that worked at a warehouse and they would have cases of them that were either out of date or something was wrong with them. They'd throw them out. So he wasn't supposed to give them to anybody, but he knew what I was using them for. So he would sneak me a couple cases of them every once in a while. So I was leaving these cookies out in the woods, this one particular spot for the Bigfoot. And I could always tell if they took it or something else did, because if they took it, they would take the whole package. But if something else got into it, they would eat it right there and leave a mess, and I'd have to clean it up. But so I started doing that following summer. And I had another fellow that was interested in Bigfooting, and he wanted to go out with me. So one afternoon, I took him and his wife, and we went several different places where I thought maybe we could find something, some evidence or something. And we did that day. We found a couple of what we thought were bedding sites in a hayfield it looked like they had lain down there in the grass and they made imprints in the grass. And they were too big to have been deer or something else. And there was one that was real obvious that a humanoid like thing had laid there. You could see the outline of it in the grass. So we thought we were having a pretty good day. So we went back to my gifting site and I put some cookies out. And he said to me, "Well, I feel really bad. I didn't bring anything for him." And he goes, "Well, hang on a second." So he went in the back of his truck and he pulled out a 40-ounce Bud Light that he had laying in the back seat of his car. And he put the beer with the cookies and we left it there. So we went way about 500 yards away over to the other side of the hayfield. And we were looking around over there, and his wife had gotten out of the truck, and she was just standing next to it while him and I were walking around. And she says, "Guys, something just came out of the woods and is standing over there in the long grass." So I grabbed my binoculars, and as soon as it noticed that we noticed it, it went right down into the grass. So we stood there and watched it for a little while, but every once in a while, curiosity would get the best of it, and it would stick its head up to look at us. And it was that young Bigfoot. He was out there in the long grass. I think he was heading for our gifting site, but he came out a little too quick, didn't realize we were still there. So we kind of caught him between the woods and the high grass. So he hung out there quite a while. We watched him for probably 10 minutes. And the other two people, "Can we get closer? Can we get closer?" I was like, "No, I don't want to scare them." I said, I've been doing this for a while now, putting these cookies and everything out. I want them not to be afraid of me, so then maybe I'll get a chance to see them better. So we left. And a couple of days later, I came back and I checked and everything was gone, including the beer. So I was like, well, I wonder if they're going to figure out how to open it or not. But I'd heard other people say that they'd had beer stolen out of their coolers and things by Bigfoot. So I'm thinking, well, they'll probably figure it out. Well, that fall came around and it was time to go hunting again. And I went to my tree stand, and there on the third rung of my tree stand was the beer. It wasn't open, but it was on the third rung of my tree stand, just sitting there. So apparently they brought it back to me. Couldn't figure out what to do with it, I guess, or I can't hear you. I lost your audio.
I'm sorry. Swamp Kitty was in the back raising Cain, and she likes to crash the show, so I just beat her to the punch. But
Oh, okay.
that was probably mom or dad Bigfoot bringing that beer back and saying, "You can't give my child alcohol. That's not good, Dean. That's not good." It's just, especially if it's malt liquor, it's terrible. I don't know what you're thinking, but you got your beer back. That was naughty. That's no, he's probably not
That,
even 18 yet.
yeah, it was funny.
Yeah, that was against the law if you're a person.
Yeah.
Wow. Between Fonzie and leaving beer out there, man, you got a lot on your plate over there, don't you?
Well, they there was a sighting up here that went viral um, a few years later, about 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
You're still laughing about the beer,
My face is
huh?
red. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that's okay. There was
Okay.
a sighting that went viral up here about 3 years ago. And since I'm the local Bigfoot guy, everybody called me, wanted to know my opinion of it and all that kind of thing. And it actually was mentioned on CNN, and it was mentioned on Coast to Coast, and there was a write up in the paper. They had pictures of me holding a Bigfoot cast that I'd made and stuff. So it was kind of cool, but I had my like 15 minutes of Bigfoot fame, I guess, with that. And, but anyway, they, PBS decided they were going to do a special on folklore in Northern New York. So they contacted me and they came and interviewed me and they wanted to see where I was gifting them and things. So I made them promise that they wouldn't reveal the spot. I would show them, but I didn't want anybody to know where it was. So I took them back and I showed.
So you got to the point where you made them promise not to tell. And you took them back out to the spot, and
Yep.
that's where I lost you. That's
Okay.
where I,
Well, the day before, my grandson and I had gone back. I have a camp, a hunting camp back there now, that I put in during the pandemic. That was kind of my pandemic project. I built a hunting camp back there. And so my grandson and I went back there the day before, and we found a set of toddler tracks. So I think that they may have had another child, the Bigfoot in the area, because these were just very small uh, tracks, maybe about the size of a 3-year-old. We found 3 of them in the mud near the woods, and
Wow.
I don't think any little kids were back there. So I'm pretty sure that there's at least 4 of them back there now in that area. I'm guessing mom and dad and the young adult that I saw, plus now there, I guess there's another one there now too. Um, well, be about that was about 3 years ago, so it'd be probably 6 or 7 years old now, probably. But anyway, uh, after the PBS people, they had brought cookies and stuff because I had told them about that. So they had brought cookies to gift them and things, and we put that out. And the weekend after that, my grandson and I went back there to go camping again. He lives down in New Jersey, so he had come up to visit me, and we wanted to go out for another couple of days before he had to go home. So we went back to the camp again, and I invited another friend of mine who was a Bigfoot experiencer. He had seen one up in Alaska. Well, actually, he'd seen 3 of them up in Alaska, family unit, when he was up there doing his. He was in the service up there. He was an MP,
Wow.
and so anyway, I had invited him to come to camp, and he hadn't gotten there yet. And my grandson and I started hearing wood knocking. So we came away from where the camp is, and we walked back towards the area where we heard the wood knocking come from. And we were just standing there listening to it. And my friend arrived, and he pulled in with his Jeep. So he goes, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we told him we've been hearing some wood knocking. So he came back there and stood with us for a little while. But as soon as he had gotten there, it had quit. So I guess they heard or saw the Jeep come in. So we walked back to camp, and right near where my grill is, they had left me something while we were gone. They left me 4 corn cobs and 7 potatoes in a little
Wow.
circle, just a little ways
Wow.
away from where that grill is. So I'm thinking maybe the wood knocking that particular day was to get me away from the camp so they could come and drop their gift off to me. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool, but I've also heard a lot of negative things that when you gift and you're not able to get out there and gift them, they get a little bit rowdy or aggressive because they're used to it. Have,
Yeah, I've heard that too, but I really haven't had them get aggressive with me other than that howling that one time. But they've never really, the worst thing they've done is gone by the camp and slapped the side of it in the middle of the night. They've done that a couple of different times. But I always just thought that was a greeting. I just thought they were coming by the camp, saw I was there, and were saying hi. That's how I always took it. I didn't take it as an aggressive thing, that they were, hey, get out of here kind of thing.
so,
I gifted
so
them by accident this spring, and I'm hoping that they're going to forgive me for this one. I had left
oh,
I had left a big jar of pickle sausages in my camp over the winter. They were in there all winter long, so I didn't think they probably were any good because they had been frozen and unthawed and frozen and unthawed. So I took the jar and I left it on the picnic table while I was cleaning the camp this spring. So I needed to take the junk and stuff out to the garbage. So I didn't come back that day, and I forgot and left the pickle
oh,
sausages on the picnic table. So when I came back a couple of days later, they had eaten the pickle sausages. They left the jar there, but they'd eaten the pickle sausages out of the jar. And I'm hoping they didn't get sick because I really didn't think that they were fit to eat. I was going to throw them in the garbage, and so I hope they're not mad at me.
it's almost like you're running a sports bar out there, pickled sausages and beer and generic Oreos. I just,
Well,
I hope it didn't make them sick either. But it's good that you've had a positive reaction from them on gifting. I've heard some really scary things when people have stopped gifting them. So, did their behavior change toward you once the little one come in the picture?
Well, I haven't been back there too much the last couple of seasons because I had moved to Pennsylvania for a short time, and so I had been away, and I'd only spent a couple of weekends at the camp that year, and I didn't hunt the last 2 years. And this past year, I had a lot of other family things going on, so once again, I decided to forego hunting this year. Hopefully, this coming summer, I'm planning on spending some time at the camp more than I have been over the last couple of years. I'd like to reestablish my relationship with him if I can. I'm going to do some more gifting this summer and try to do some other things back there for him too. Um, but I really don't think that it's really changed. The younger one, um, I do believe that he has been around a few times when I've been back there. Um, Not having direct sightings of him, but you'll catch a glimpse of Brown. And I was back there cutting firewood one day, and a small tree got pushed over. I think he was thinking he was helping me. It was just a little small tree, and I stopped the chainsaw and I was throwing the stuff up into the truck when that happened. Um, Maybe 100 yards away from me, but the tree come falling down, and that just seemed like too big a coincidence that it happened while I was there. You know, trees I guess fall every day, but it just kind of seemed like a coincidence, not too big of a coincidence for it had not been him or one of the other ones. But the last sighting I had was approximately 3 years ago. Um, I was mowing the lawn at the camp, and I looked across the field, and there was one of them. I'm thinking it was the younger one, was standing by the fence, looking over the fence, watching me mow the lawn. And I did get a picture of him, uh, but it's your typical grainy, too far away Bigfoot picture. But I did get a picture of him standing there, and I went back and measured um, later, and I'm estimating he was about 6 foot tall.
So,
But
go ahead.
no, I mean that doesn't take him out of the range of it could have been a person, but I don't think it was just because of the way he acted. As soon as he noticed me noticing him, he walked away. And if it had been a person, he would have went, I think, in the opposite direction of what he did because he headed right for the woods. Where I think if it had been a person, he would either came towards me or he'd have went back towards. There's houses on the other side. There's an Amish family that live on the other side there. My sister has a place out by the road. So if it had been a person, I think they would have went the other direction. But this one, he went right straight for the woods. So
Well, going back when you first saw the silhouette in the woods, I think it was the deer story where you
Mhm.
took the deer back after they took the deer. You said you saw a silhouette. About how tall was the silhouette?
he was a big one. I'm guessing 7 foot tall. He was pretty big. He was pretty big. I think it could have been even been the same male that I saw when I told you the story about where I thought it might have been a moose coming through there. He was every bit as tall as that one that I saw. Um, but like I said, I didn't get a good look at him. It was dark, and I just caught the silhouette with the flashlight real quick, and he was gone. Um, so I'm thinking it was either Big Papa or Big Mama that was there. It wasn't the young one.
In hindsight, if you had, if you knew what had taken that deer, would you have left it, or would you reclaimed your deer?
Oh, I'd have still taken it. I love venison, and it was the last day of the season. He wasn't taking my deer.
Oh, poor
I might have
Fonzie.
left him a little bit more than I did. I left him. I mean, he got the innards, but I might have left him a little bit more if I, maybe I would have cut off one of the legs or something and left it for him. But at the time I didn't know what was going. I'm not one of these guys. Every time I hear anything in the woods, I automatically think it's a Bigfoot. I have to really have proof that it's a Bigfoot before I'm going to say that's what it was. I'm I'm uh, I'm not jumping to that conclusion every time. And there's a lot of other critters in the woods that make a lot of noise too. One of the
So,
noisiest critters in the woods is a squirrel.
yeah, aren't they? Actually, one of my friends posted a video with a squirrel in it, and I was like, "Man, that's funny." But anyway, so you've had them on your property all of these years. What's the most abnormal behavior that you can contribute to a Bigfoot or Sasquatch that you just don't hear about?
Oh boy. Well,
Other
the
than not
definitely,
drinking free beer.
well, definitely the leaving when they left me that gift that time. That was really strange. I really hadn't heard about them doing that very often. I've heard them like leaving little pebbles or things like that when people have left things out for them, but I'd never experienced that before. So when they left that there for me, I thought that was pretty cool. Um, I was interviewed by ever heard of the Ghost Hunters Taps organization? I believe they're out of New Jersey. Well, they had a radio show kind of similar to yours, internet show for a while on paranormal things, and they had me on there one time to talk about Bigfoot in New York, and I didn't think too much of it, other than I got the opportunity to be on there, and I was at a convention in Baltimore, and I was approached by three young ladies, and they said, "Are you the Bigfoot guy?" Because I had spoken at the convention, and I was the only one there that had done Bigfoot. They had panels on different subjects, and I had done the Bigfoot panel. And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we missed your panel. We got confused on the time, but we really wanted to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay." And they said, "Well, they were from Bath, New York, and they had ghost hunters had been on their property because there was a haunted cemetery on their land. The farmer next door had accidentally bulldozed into some unmarked graves on one side of the cemetery to expand his cornfield, and apparently he had caused some paranormal activity to happen there. So the ghost hunters had been there for that. And while they were there, they were out walking around in the cornfield, and they found Bigfoot tracks in the cornfield. So they had told them, "Well, we know this guy in New York, Dean Gleason. You should get a hold of him to come down and do a Bigfoot investigation." So they invited me to come down. So that following year, I went down and I did a Bigfoot investigation for a couple of days down in Bath, New York. And we had great results down there. We didn't have any sightings, but we had a lot of strange things happen. Um, One of them was we had four people went out, and we were in groups of two. We split up into groups of two, and I was with a young man, and we were down by the swamp, and the other two ladies had gone up this hill and were standing between us and where the main dirt road that came down through there was. And we had been down there for a little while, and we heard a noise behind us, and I thought it was one of the girls walking around from the second team. So when we got back together a little later and we were talking about what had happened, I said, "What were you guys doing walking around up there?" And they said, "We weren't walking around up there. We heard it too and thought it was you guys." So the next morning we went to the same spot and we looked, and right between where I was with the other guy and the two girls, a Bigfoot had taken a dump right between us. I mean, there was a big pile of scat right in the area
Wow.
where we heard something moving around the night before.
Holy
So
cow. Did you
that
keep
was pretty
that
bizarre.
or did you collect that? Did you
No,
collect
we didn't. I didn't have the stuff with me to do it. But we dissected it. We looked through it, and it had a lot of hair in it,
your
like it had eaten something with fur, and it had some nuts in it, and it some other uh, plant growth in there. But the main thing that struck me was there was little small bones, and there was hair in the scat. So it was a carnivore, whatever it was, and there are
how big
very few bear in that area.
about how big was it?
The scat. Uh,
Hmm.
Let me say, I'd still be in the hospital if I passed it. It was huge. It looked
Oh,
human, but it was huge. It was very big. Something with an abnormal size keister made that pile. So it
but you
was it
got
was
some, I'm sorry, but you got some good insight about
yeah, yeah. Um, well, that night we did two night investigations. We did an early one, And the part I just told you about happened on the early one. And we went back later when it got real, real dark to another spot up the road where there was a pond. And we went down by the pond. There was four of us again. And we split up again into, no, excuse me, I take that back. There was five of us. One group of three and one group of two. And there was a young lady with us who hadn't gone on the first one. She was about 16 years old. She was the daughter of the farmer who owned the land, and she begged to go with us. And her parents told her she could go as long as she didn't get too rambunctious and did everything I told her to do. They said, "Well, listen to Dean. If he tells you to do something, do it, and you can go." So she stayed with me and the fellow that was with me in the first investigation. Excuse me. And we were down by this pond, and we were making a few whoops and some noises to see if we could get a response. And we didn't get much of a response. We heard some noises, but we weren't sure whether it was a Bigfoot or could have been something else. So I told those two to go up to the top of the hill and do some wood knocking, and I was going to stay down by the pond. So they went up the hill, and I was dealing with rookies. They hadn't never done this before. So I didn't give them as many instructions as I probably should have. But anyways, they went up the hill and they made some wood knocking, and we got a response almost immediately. We got a wood knock back, and they freaked out. They're talking real loud. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? And I'm like, oh great, they blew our cover. You know, I that was my fault. I didn't tell them you got to be quiet, don't talk. So they come running down to where I was. Did you hear that, Dean? Did you hear that? I'm like, yep, I heard that, but we're done for the night because they know we're people now and they're not going to respond anymore. So the young man said, well, I'll go first. I know the area. And it was pretty dark at this point. So he's in front of me, and the young lady is walking next to me, and we're walking back to where our vehicles are. And I think every paranormal investigator, whether you do UFOs or you do Bigfooting or you do dog manning or you do ghost hunting, whatever, has had a Scooby-Doo moment. Well, this was our Scooby-Doo moment. We got almost back to the trucks, and the young lady leans into me and she says, boy, it's kind of hard to walk in the dark like this, isn't it? And she no more has said that, and we got a wood knock, and it couldn't have been any more than 50 feet away from us. It was like crack. And she started grabbing handfuls of me and tried to climb right up on my back, screaming, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's right over there, it's right over there. And I'm laughing at this point. And I'm like, yeah, it's right over there. I said, but it's not going to hurt you. I said, it's just letting you know it's there. I said, if it was going to hurt you, it would have did it already. I said, we're fine. It's not going to hurt us. And we got back to the trucks, and we had quite a good laugh about that the next day when, you know, everybody was safe inside the house.
No doubt. So, so let me ask you this. So you have a privilege of being on property where you know there's activity. So, what do you think arches and not wood knocks mean? What do you think their purpose are?
You said arches, was that the first thing you said?
Arches and wood knocks.
Yeah, okay. The arches, I've had very little experience with them. It doesn't seem to be a thing that the Bigfoot up here do very often. I mean, I've seen a few, the trees bent over. I think that's probably maybe a territorial thing, letting other Bigfoot know that, okay, this is our area. You know, I don't know how social they are with other Bigfoot groups, or they could be just, hey, we're here. That could be another thing too, letting the other Bigfoot know we're here. You know, there's other Bigfoot in your area. You know, but I'm sure for the most part, the Bigfoot in a general area know each other. I mean, I'm sure they have to get together for mating and for other, you know, social things that probably Bigfoot do together. I read a book one time called Enoch, a Bigfoot story that was about skunk apes. It was basically what that was about, but it was written by a gentleman who claims to have lived with them. And he mentioned that the different groups get together every so often and, you know, choose mates and
yeah. Well, if you keep
Extreme.
leaving, well, if you keep leaving beer out there, they might have a bunch of babies and parties and stuff.
We only did that the one time, just that one time. Um, but that was just a kind of a joke when we did it.
That's
But
fine. I'm just giving you a hard way to
yep.
go, Dean. It's a serious subject and it's a fascinating subject. Sometimes you just got to be lighthearted about it because so many people do have
Oh yeah.
negative experiences. If I can rib you, I'm going to.
Well, that's fine. I'll give it right back to you. Um,
All right.
as far as the wood knocking, I think that is kind of a letting each other know where they are, because I've experienced it where I know there was three Bigfoot doing it because it was coming from three different uh, places. Like I was once I do a lot of deer hunting, so it was when I was out deer hunting, and I was sitting in a spot, and I would hear a wood knock come from this direction, and then I'd hear one like from up behind where I was setting, and then I'd hear one from further down the valley. So my impression, and it was kind of happening on regular intervals all day that particular day. So I was kind of getting the impression they were letting each other know where they were. They probably were deer hunting themselves or gathering food, and they were just checking in with each other because it was happening. I can't say you could set your watch by it, but it was happening quite on a regular interval that they were doing this. So I think for the most part, it's just to let each other know where they are, or if they're coming into an area where they're not sure where the other Bigfoot are, maybe it's another clan. They'll do some wood knocking just to let each other know, hey, we're coming through, or hey, this is where we are if you want to meet up or whatever. That's my impression. I mean, that's what the great apes use it for, and I'm under the belief that that's what Bigfoot is. He's an undiscovered great ape. So
You
um,
said you do or you don't.
well, I think he's a great ape. Yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay.
believe that Bigfoot is an undiscovered great ape. I believe they're fresh in blood. I don't believe in all the hocus pocus that some people have tried to put with Bigfoot, or try to say that he's an alien or something like that. I don't believe in any of that. I believe that they're native to this planet. They just have eluded us. Um, they're
And
smart enough to know that probably it's not a good thing to hang around with man.
and
They,
and based on the experience that you have with them, you're entitled to have that opinion, and that's where your research has taken you. So if someone doesn't agree with it, I mean, if you're going to have a discussion with someone, not everybody's research is going to take them down the same road, but the thing is to agree to disagree and be respectful about it. and
sure.
and you and so for people that don't believe they're flesh and blood, your research tells you that they are. And you've had some incredible encounters and you've been able to observe one for 10 minutes. So that's more than most of us will ever have in a lifetime. And so if that's where you're if that is where your research takes it, people they need to respect that because that's where their research may take them somewhere else. But none of us are experts, and I have a tendency to agree with you. I do think there's some high strangeness around it, but and I don't think that they're all really good to be around. I really don't, but I don't think that they're all aggressive either. So
No, I was talking to a Bigfoot researcher. He does most of his research out west, out in the Rockies, and he's had a couple of he had one real close encounter with a Bigfoot when he was a kid. Um, but he told the story about how he saw a big male Bigfoot with a white streak down one side of his head, and he didn't tell anybody that detail. And he went to a Halloween party, and the people that were hosting the Halloween party had hired a psychic as part of their entertainment for the party, and he doesn't believe in that, so he didn't go and have a reading done by her. And he was just getting ready to leave, and somebody came up to him and said, "Hey, the psychic asked me to come find you. She wants to talk to you." And so he thought his friend put her up to it or whatever. Because he was poo pooing the whole thing, and when he went over to talk to her, she said, "I got to ask you a question." She goes, "Do you go up into the mountains a lot?" And he said that nobody at the party knew that he did Bigfoot research. And he said, "Well, yeah, I do." And she said, "Well," she said, "I don't know how to describe this, but when you've been up there, have you ever seen anything that looked like, I don't know, like a big monkey?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And she says, "Did it have a white streak down one side of its head?"
Hmm.
And he said, "Yes." And she says, "Well, do you remember where you saw it?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't go back there." And she said, "Why not?" And he goes, "Well, it didn't like it that you were there. And it's already decided that if you come back there, it's going to kick your butt."
Oh my goodness.
And he said that kind of freaked him out a little bit because he hadn't told anybody. And so he said he didn't go back there again. But he had gotten lost when he was a child, when he was out camping with his family and another couple. And he claims that a female Bigfoot grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and dragged him back to inside of their camp and then shoved him towards
Wow.
his cliff and turned around and walked away. And he said when he got back to camp, the first thing that his mother said to him, "Have you been into a skunk? You stink."
Stink.
And he said, "No, the big monkey stinks." And she goes, "What big monkey?" He goes, "It was a big girl monkey brought me back to the camp and she stunk." And he goes, and his mom didn't believe him, but the couple that was with him, um, the husband was Native American, and he told his mother, he goes, "Don't call him a liar because they are here." He goes, he's not lying." He goes, "I don't believe he's lying. I think he really saw one." And so that kind of whetted his appetite to the whole Bigfoot thing, and he did research after that. I've got a Native American on my team, and he's had experiences since he was 6 years old. Uh,
Wow.
he had a family of Bigfoot that lived behind his house, and his mother thought he had an imaginary friend, but she was real. They had a little girl, and the little girl would come and play with him in the backyard when the adults weren't around. And he doesn't know why, but he knew that her name was Luna, and that's what he always called her. And he said to this day, sometimes when he goes home, Luna will stick her head out of the woods and wave to him, or make her presence known when he's back at his old home. He said he's seen her quite a few times over the years. And
That is amazing.
and
So
I've learned to trust him. I call him my Bigfoot whisperer. If he goes out on an expedition with me, and we'll get into the woods, and he'll kind of stand there looking around. He'll go, "No, no, no, nothing around. They're not here." And we've hung out, and nothing happened. And other times we've walked into the woods. "Yep, they're here," and we'll always have something happen. We'll get a howl, we'll get a knock, we'll get something that if he says they're there. And the last time we were at my camp, and we were just all hanging out by the fire talking, and we weren't even talking about Bigfoot. We were just hanging out, bunch of guys, and everybody had kind of thinned out. It was just me, him, and my grandson left. And he's sitting there, and he got real quiet. And I go, "What's up, Adam?" He goes, "They're here." And I go, "Good or bad?" He goes, "Oh, just curious. They're just watching us, wondering what we're up to." And I've always learned to trust him. And he went home that night, and probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, one walked by and slapped aside the camp. And I think that was the first time it's ever happened, but it's happened several times since then. But I've always learned to trust him. He always seems to know. So.
do you think the ones that share the land with you, do you think that there's unofficial boundaries between that you both don't cross or anything like that? Has that ever been set?
No, I've really never got that feeling. I have nephews that hunt the land too, and they've never had an experience back there. They think I'm crazy until the one day I pulled up the pictures on my phone of tracks that obviously went right by things that they knew. I go, "Well, I said, they're not back there, huh?" "Oh, no, no, no." I go, "Well, look, how'd this happen?" And there was tracks in the snow that went right down along the fence, and it was obvious it was my land. And I remember my one nephew, his mouth just dropped wide open. I said, "Do you recognize that spot?" He goes, "Yeah." I
Have you
says,
ever
"Well,
took a knife? Have you ever took a non-believer out and made a believer out of them,
Uh,
other than your nephews?
yeah, my nephews, I don't really go out with them. They kind of go by themselves. I don't think that the one lady that went with us on the Bath exposition, I don't think she believed, but she definitely did after, because I have gone down there a couple times since then, and I went down to a graduation party down there for the young lady who tried to climb on my back. She graduated from college, and she invited me to her graduation party, so I went down to it, and we were kind of going, down memory lane. So we kind of took a walk around down by where we'd done the bigfooting, and we got to the spot where we had had that one do the wood knock like 50 feet from us, and the one woman that was with us goes, and that's right where it stood. And before that, I didn't get the impression that she really was a believer, but she was pointing it out to the other people that were with us. That's right where it was. It was right there. So
I think
I think I convinced her.
I think sometimes your your mind has prepared you to accept that. Sometimes that takes some time. That your mind
Yep.
just has to say this is what you saw, and you have. I mean, you. I always tell people your mind has a way to protect you until you're ready to accept something.
Yep.
What do you
I
look
agree.
for in a what do you look for in a research partner, or I mean, what's a good key factors to have in someone to go out with you?
Well, just the willingness to have an open mind if they have never had an experience. Uh, have that open mind when they go out there, not just poo poo it and say, oh, these things can't exist. So no matter what I see or hear, I'm going to discount it. I mean, I used to get so frustrated with watching Finding Bigfoot with Renee, their resident skeptic they had on the show. I mean, she would bend over backwards. If she had been a UFO investigator, everything to her would have been swamp gas and weather balloons. But she was the equivalent of that in Bigfooting. And I
Hmm.
happen to know one of the ladies that was on the show that was a witness, and talking to her afterwards, after being on the show, she had zero respect for uh, Renee. I don't know. I think you know who I mean. She had
Yeah, I
zero
do.
respect for her, and in fact, they almost came to blows at one point during the show because she was being so ignorant to her, and her experience, basically almost coming right out and calling her a liar. But um, and
It's
knowing my
hard
friend.
enough. It's hard enough to come forward to start with.
Mhm. Well, that's why a lot of people don't, because I mean, I know that's why I didn't tell people for years when I had the turtle experience, um, because I figured people think I was making it up or lying or whatever, or was just crazy. And I got enough people to think I'm crazy without adding to the fuel. But uh, I I listened to um, Bigfoot and Beyond. It's two of the people from Finding Bigfoot have a podcast they do on Mondays, and I listen to it whenever I get a chance. And um, Cliff, who was on the show, he's he made a statement on there, and I think it's very true. That I think that there are a lot of people out there that have evidence that they're sitting on that won't come forward with it because of the fact that they're not ready for the ridicule. They're not ready for people calling them a liar. They're not ready for people to say, you hoax this or whatever. He says he thinks when Bigfoot is actually discovered and as classified as a living being, that these people are suddenly going to come forward. Oh yeah, I've got this video from my game cam. I've got this video I took on my cell phone. I've got this. I've got that. And he says he thinks we're just going to be flooded with pictures and video and things like that once the stigma is taken away from Bigfoot. Um, he says, he says he's sure of it. He's sure that there's tons of people out there just sitting on evidence, but they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to be Todd Standish. He has some of the best pictures of Bigfoot, and everybody thinks he hoaxes it. And I'm not convinced that he does. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe he is a hoaxer, but I'm not convinced 100% that he is, because some of that stuff he's got looks great. And if he is, he's really good at it. So,
One of
I
the
think we're
worst.
going to see it.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
I think one of the worst things in the field for both people that have an encounter and an experience and a researcher is a hoaxer. And I'm not saying, that because we brought up Todd Standing's uh name. I have my opinion, but he's not on the show, so I'll keep it to myself. But hoaxers are what gives a I think hoaxers set the research back so much, and they set back the people that probably would be more comfortable to come forward. It takes one hoaxer to just take that back for years.
Oh, sure does. And that's the same thing in any of the fields of cryptozoology. I mean, there's a lot of people that can are faking UFO evidence,
Hmm.
and that's hurting things. It's giving the ridicule factor to it because of them. Same way with Bigfoot. Every time somebody fakes something, it sets the legitimate stuff back. Um, People don't want to believe. I don't think the mainstream media poo-poos the whole thing, and they're very ignorant on the subject, but they act like they're experts. Like I don't know how many people come say, "Well, there can't be a Bigfoot," and I'm like, "Why can't there be one?" Well, because he can't be at all these different spots. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Well, there's only one, right? I'm like, no, they're a species. There's thousands of them. Well, I thought there was just one, and I've had that said to me, I don't know how many times. I mean, I was at a hotel, and I was wearing a Bigfoot sweatshirt or something, and it had Bigfoot on it. And I was eating breakfast, and this lady comes up to me and says, "Oh, I like your sweatshirt or whatever." And she says, "Too bad they're not real." And I looked at her, I go, "Well, why don't you think they're real?" And then she came up, "Well, they can't be seen in New York and California and this place. He can't be in all those places." And I'm like, and then she was one of those people that believed that there was only one, like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus or something like that. There's only one of them. Okay, there's only one Bigfoot. Well, no, there's lots of Bigfoot. They're a species.
I
They couldn't
think
have existed if they didn't breed and have baby Bigfoot. So
I think another area where we go wrong is we always compare to the patty type. And I tell almost probably every show I have, they're not all patty type. Some are slender, they're athletic, they have useful muscles. If you look at them and you're looking at them from a distance, you're like, is that someone all dressed in black or a ghillie suit? I mean, they're almost like looking at an athlete on the
yeah,
field. And so they're
well, it
not
was
all
like the guy that wrote that book, the Enoch book that I was telling you about earlier. He says some of them look very human, uh, face wise. Their faces are very human looking. And you've heard people talk about that. There's hunters that said they've had them dead in their scope, and we're going to pull the trigger. And then they looked in their face, and they just looked so darn human, and their expressions and their eyes, they look human. But then you hear other people say they look like an ape. Ones I've seen, face wise, um, they look a lot. They look a lot like us. I mean, their brow ridges are different. They have the conical head, but if you look them straight in the face, and I've gotten to do that from 40, 50 feet away, that young one, he didn't look much different from me than a lot of people I've seen. I've seen people that look like him in the face, and
what
body wise, he was all covered with hair and he was naked, but um, face wise, he could have passed for some people I've seen.
what do you think of the people that say we need a body?
I think they're right, but it's not right. If you understand what I'm saying,
I do.
I think to get mainstream science to accept it, there's going to have to be a body. But I don't want to see one killed just for that reason. I'm
Why
hoping
why
that
do we go ahead?
maybe they'll find one that died of natural causes. I'm hoping something like that might happen where it's indisputable and they're not going to be able to cover it up. I think the government has known for years and years and years that Bigfoot is real. I think they have bodies. I've heard
Mhm.
stories. We had a prison breakout up in my area. They even made a movie about it. Dannemora is the name of the prison, where these two guys escaped with the help of a lady that worked at the prison. And one of them ended up being shot to death by state troopers. And the other one was shot, but he lived. But I heard stories that during the search for those prisoners, that two Bigfoot were killed uh, by the state troopers that were in the woods looking for those prisoners. Shot two Bigfoot. I heard that story from several sources. One of them was from a correctional source told me that, and he said the bodies were flown out, were bagged and flown out. Um, I've heard stories about them finding dead Bigfoot after forest fires. There was a story that they found 8 dead Bigfoot after Mount St. Helens blew up. Um, I heard another story where some forest fire firemen found a Bigfoot that had been injured and was still alive and was medevaced out and was never seen again. Um, I don't think the government wants to admit that they exist. I'm not a big conspiracy theory person. I don't walk around with a tinfoil hat or any of that kind of stuff. But I really feel the government does not feel at this point that it's to their advantage to admit that Bigfoot exists. The FBI has kind of come out and said that they do. There's several states that have come out and acknowledged the fact that Bigfoot is real. But as far as mainstream media and mainstream science, they haven't. And I think a lot of it is with government pressure. They don't want to admit it.
So here's my thing, and this is why I have haters. Why do we need to prove that they are real? Because they don't obviously need our protection. They don't need anything from us. Everything that we have vowed to protect, literally everything that we put our hands on as human beings, we, even for the best of intentions, we end up destroying
I agree.
harm.
I
So
agree.
why are we trying to prove it? Because to me, it'd be their downfall.
But that's our nature, don't you think? Man is always trying to prove the mystery, solve the mystery. We're it's and Bigfoot is a mystery, and human beings like to solve mysteries. That's why Sherlock Holmes and Columbo and all the other detectives are such a popular genre in our culture. Humans like to know the meaning of things. They like to know the results of things. You don't want to watch a cliffhanger and then have the series canceled. You want to know what happened. I just think that's our nature.
Do we want to have the proof out there definitively? Because we all know they're out there, but is it that we want to protect them, or we want people to quit calling us crazy for believing? Is it our egos, or are we trying to do the right thing?
I think it's a mixture of both, and depending on the researchers that you're talking to, I think there's researchers on both sides of that, and some that are on another whole trajectory. Um, I I come down to the side. I want Bigfoot to be proven to be real, probably because of the fact that I think that there's a lot of good people out there that have had their names besmirched and been ridiculed and called liars and things, including myself and probably you. And I'd like to see it proven for that, so that we're validated or whatever. But I don't want to see it because there's other part of me doesn't want to see it because I don't want Bigfoot harmed. I don't want the species to disappear because we know it's there. Um, because you're going to get your well-meaning like Jane Goodalls out there that are going to go out and try to study them for legitimate non-selfish purposes, but then you're also going to get your Barnum and Bailey people out there that are going to want to have one that they can display somewhere and make money on. So you're going to have both ends of the spectrum if Bigfoot is proven to be a real species, which I believe it is. Um,
I, I think some things are better
things
left
that
alone.
worry, there's a lot of things that do worry me though, because once you get the government involved in anything, it just becomes a fiasco, and the bureaucracy does some really, really strange things. Um, I, but personally, I really think the government already knows
Yeah,
that they're there. And the government has to. They have to know. But I think they're looking at it from several different points of view why they don't want to admit it. Because if they do admit it, they're going to have to declare it a endangered species, and that's going to open up a whole can of worms as far as the logging industry and wildlife management, water management. A whole bunch of things are going to get a monkey wrench thrown into. That's part of it. The other thing is too is if they're genetically anywheres near us, and the DNA so far is kind of showing that they probably are,
hmm
then you're going to open up a whole can of worms. Okay, what rights do they have? Do they have human rights? Does the Constitution apply to them? Do they have the right to vote? Do they have the right to everything that we have the right to? Housing, medical care, all that kind of stuff. That's going to be a debate. And then there's the religious aspect of it. There's going to be some people in certain churches that are going to be very upset about it. Um, I'm personally a religious man. I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid to admit it, but I can reconcile certain things into my religion and not take away from it. I can reconcile life on other planets into my religion and not bother me. I can recognize Bigfoot as maybe being related to us somehow, and it's not going to change what I believe. But there are people that it would totally upset their whole apple cart. And there was a study done about aliens, and one of the things in there was that it was going to upset the religious balance if aliens were admitted to be real. Um, so I think it's going to be the same kind of thing with Bigfoot. There's going to be certain aspects that's going to affect our culture. Um, for the good or the bad, we don't know. But I think the government is erring on the side that it's going to be bad. So that's one of the reasons why they're not coming forth saying, yeah, they're there.
Some things are better left alone. Some things are just better left alone. Let people get their
That's just like
cast and
I heard one time. Yeah,
pardon.
I heard one time, they were talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Maybe it's better that it's not found. The lost Ark of the Covenant. Maybe it's better that we don't know where it is, because that could cause a whole lot of trouble, especially now with the with Israel talking about rebuilding the temple. Okay, if you rebuild the temple, you're going to want the Ark of the Covenant there, because that's what originally the purpose of the whole temple thing was, and that's going to upset our Muslim neighbors, and some other people in that area are not going to like it. So maybe it's better we don't know where it is. Um, I've heard that argument made too. Not trying to get religious or anything on you. I'm just
No,
saying it all kind of fits together. You know, People are going to have adverse reactions to no matter which particular thing is going to upset their particular belief of their apple cart.
I agree. We live in a world where we are unable to have discussions, which is, part of the reason I try to make the show lighthearted, because there's so much anger and conflict in the world. And this is one subject where I take very seriously. However, it's okay to laugh and have a good
Oh,
time
sure
with
is.
it too. And to me, I think between grown people going in the woods looking for, Bigfoot, most of us just need to justify it. Most of us are fascinated, but to me, if I had a chance, if it made me a billionaire, I would not bring forth that body or whatever it is, because it would not be worth the curse it would bring into my life. And that's
I can
just
see
me.
what you're saying. Yeah. When I go bigfooting, people say, don't you think you're wasting your time? The worst thing that happens if I go Bigfooting is that I spent the day walking in the woods. And what's bad about that?
Good
What's
friends.
bad about spending a day walking in the woods? Especially if you take somebody with you. Then both of you enjoyed each other's company. You enjoy being in the woods together. You enjoyed seeing nature. If you got lucky, maybe something happened. If it didn't, oh well, you spent the day in the woods. It's better than spending the day looking at your smartphone or spending the day staring at the boob tube. You were out in the
Yes.
woods where we're meant to be.
Well, we are going on an hour and 16 minutes, and man, that has flown by. I have really enjoyed having you on, and I think your story is just very interesting. I hope that someone out there is able to hear it and can come to terms with maybe something they've got going on their property or the experiences they had. And I have really enjoyed having you on. And normally, when I wind up the show, I ask people if they have someone, whether it's in the Bigfoot community or just in their life in general, that they would just like to take a moment to pay tribute to. Do you have anyone like that?
Well, I mentioned him before at the beginning of the show, but uh, my grandfather was a very important person in my life. He has since passed away, but he was very important to me, and he's made me the man I am today. And he definitely has made me the outdoorsman that I am. And his name was also Dean. Um, Great guy, miss him terribly.